When DC first published Action Comics #1 in 1938, introducing the world to Superman, it changed the game forever. Now, almost 85 years later, superhero franchises dominate Hollywood. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is arguably the most successful both critically and financially, but that hasn't stopped DC attempting their own shared universe. Seeds were planted back in 2013 when Zack Snyder released Man of Steel, a reimagining of Superman. From then on, the universe grew, introducing Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, Cyborg, Shazam, the Joker, Harley Quinn, and many more. So with Zack Snyder's Justice League now finally released across the world, I have taken it upon myself to collate all 10 of the DC Extended Universe films and rank them from best to worst. For the purpose of this review, I will be treating both versions of Justice League as two different movies, because let's face it, they are. Also, before I start, these are just my thoughts. I want to know, what order would you put these films? Share your rankings in the comments below. So let's get going, shall we? And Picking Up the Wooden Spoon is a film that perhaps shouldn't have been playing Russian roulette.
Complete the mission, you get time off your prison sentence. Fail the mission, you die. Anything happens to Colonel Flagg, I'll kill every single one of you. Remember, I'm watching. I see everything.
There's your pep talk. Compared to your shit, she killed it. So that's it. What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
Considering that this was the third movie of the DC Extended Universe, it seemed like a pretty bizarre direction to go in. You've established Superman and Batman by this point, teased Wonder Woman, and then we go off on this tangent of a ragtag group of mostly villains forced to come together to fight off a larger threat. Now, the Suicide Squad, I know, is a popular series of comics, but to me, this definitely seemed like Warner Brothers trying to find their own answer to Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think trying to emulate the MCU in any way is probably a bad idea. Instead, DC needed to make their own path for their films, to stand on their own two legs. Nevertheless, Suicide Squad was directed by David Ayer, who, as well as directing, wrote the screenplay. Although, Warner Brothers decided to only give him 6 weeks to write the script, which is just ludicrous, but also explains a lot. Add on a heck of a lot of reshoots and rewrites that really messed around with Ayer's original plan, and the end result is just one hot, stinking mess. The opening third is actually close to unbearable to sit through as we speed through the most haphazard of character introductions of Viola Davis's Amanda Waller literally spelling everything out for us about each member of the squad. The soundtrack keeps switching like someone is messing around with your Spotify playlist, and the editing as a whole is horrendous. By the time the squad is actually formed, that's when the movie becomes easier to watch. The squad themselves are, to all intents and purposes, quite entertaining. Will Smith as Deadshot is basically just Will Smith with a gun, but his charisma and overall screen presence makes for a fair few compelling moments. Margot Robbie crushes it as Harley Quinn, really bringing that character to life in ways that fans were hoping for. And perhaps my favourite scene of the film is the birth of Harley Quinn, which I thought was handled beautifully. Even Jai Courtney as Captain Boomerang was decent. Jared Leto as the Joker, on the other hand,
You don't want no beef? You don't want no beef?
has to be said, I'm not a fan. Now, because of all the reshoots and rewrites, we didn't get as much of the Joker as we initially thought, so there may have been a chance for it to work, but with what we were given, I thought Leto missed the mark as to who the Joker should have been. The action in the film gets quite repetitive, and it's Enchantress who's revealed to be the main villain, but she belly dances her way through the film, and honestly, she has to be one of the worst comic book movie villains of all time, given how utterly ridiculous she is, looks, and sounds. As for the soundtrack, it feels so random. Some songs work, and most of the selection are actually good songs in their own right, but their placement within the film makes no sense half the time. On the whole, Suicide Squad didn't deliver the way many fans were hoping, partially down to some of the creative decisions, but also due to Warner Brothers clearly messing around with it too much. The Central Squad are cool, so I'm definitely interested to see what James Gunn is going to do with the premise later this year, but hey, it won an Oscar. Suicide Squad has more Oscars than Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. How's that for cinema, Marty? Up next in this countdown is... well, does this one count anymore?
It's really cool. You guys seem ready to do battle and stuff, but full transparency, I've never done battle. I've just pushed some people and run away.
Save one.
What?
Save one person.
Which one?
Don't talk, don't fight. Get in, get one out.
And then?
You'll know.
So this just kind of feels somewhat redundant now. Justice League, when it came out in 2017, promised to be this epic team-up of the most iconic DC superheroes joining forces to take on a formidable foe. Little did we know that the formidable foe was, in actual fact, Warner Brothers executives chopping this movie down. Obviously, the production history of the film is quite well known. Snyder pretty much directed his vision, but a family tragedy meant he left the film. Warner Brothers hired Joss Whedon to come in for rewrites and reshoots, changing much of what Snyder had planned. Now, hand on heart, I do not think this version of Justice League is terrible. There are plenty of good moments. Superman's fight against the League is probably the highlight for me, especially when he clocks Flash out of the corner of his eye. But having now seen the Snyder Cut, it's very clear that the things I liked most about the 2017 edition were devised by Snyder. The only thing I liked about this that wasn't included in the Snyder Cut was the cover of Come Together. I mean, that's a damn good cover. The elements I wasn't too keen on, like the barrage of quips for instance, were Whedon and Warner Brothers choosing to play it incredibly safe. Steppenwolf is this really generic looking and sounding CGI bad guy who isn't given hardly any motivation at all. The story feels so rushed and flung together with, quite obviously now, huge chunks missing to delve into the relevance of the mother boxes, as well as suitably introducing some of the newer members of the League such as Aquaman, Flash and Cyborg. Especially Cyborg. This film does not do him or Ray Fisher any due diligence. Ultimately, the biggest issue with this Justice League is how loud we have these two authorial voices clashing. You've got Snyder wanting to tell his vision, and then over the top you've got Whedon and Warner Brothers trying to play damage control for no apparent reason, resulting in a film that should have been this epic moment in comic book movie history, and ended up this muddled, bland and choppy mess that sparked more interest into uncovering the Snyder Cut than the film itself. Coming in at number 8, we land on a film that turned its attention to one of the brightest spots of Suicide Squad, giving her her long-awaited spotlight.
Can I help you?
Why, yes, you can. I'm here to report a terrible crime.
And what terrible crime is that?
This one. Hi, boys.
Regardless of your opinion on Suicide Squad, I think the love for Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn was unanimous. And Warner Brothers, listening to that, decided to put all of their eggs in that basket, and if I remember correctly, greenlit a shit ton of projects featuring Harley Quinn. You had a Harley and Joker film in development, a Gotham City Sirens adaptation being floated about, a Suicide Squad sequel, a Harley Quinn solo movie, even a Harley Quinn musical. Okay, so the last one was made up, although people would flock to see that. But the only one that saw the light of day was Birds of Prey, or to give it its full and frankly absurd title, Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. The essence of Birds of Prey was to give Harley Quinn her redemption, and that is absolutely when this movie is at its best. The Harley-Joker relationship in the comics is iconic, but you look at it now in today's climate, it raises a lot of questions. And Birds of Prey does a great job at establishing Harley stepping away from the Joker and becoming her own individual. Margot Robbie absolutely owns this character now. There's no one else in terms of live action portrayals who I could see as Harley. The film itself, however, I do think has its fair share of flaws. The title, Birds of Prey, I wouldn't say is accurate. This is Harley Quinn, the movie, and the Birds of Prey aspect plays second fiddle. It is very cool to see this group eventually form at the end of the film, but the central storyline of all of these different characters clashing over this diamond, it's really uninvolving. Characters such as Black Canary, Renee Montoya, and Huntress get some badass moments each, but their involvement in the story doesn't seem as important as the focus on Harley and her arc. Ewan McGregor as Black Mask was a really inventive piece of casting. This version of Black Mask is very different to his comic book incarnation, but it really works into the overall tone that director Cathy Yan had spread throughout her film. I will say though, despite a pretty unengaging story, Yan makes up for it with really exciting and energetic action. The raid on the police headquarters was textbook Harley Quinn, and the final bonanza at the pier was loads of fun and very well choreographed. I wouldn't say that Birds of Prey is a film I revisit time and time again, but it's fun. And after the mess of Suicide Squad, it gave Margot Robbie a great platform to really deliver the Harley Quinn fans are after. Plus it made me really hungry for Sal's egg sandwich. And I don't even really like egg. For the next spot in this list, we are diving deep into the ocean below for a superhero long parodied, but now treated like a god.
Alpha, to the right. Bravo team, clear the passageway.
Permission to come aboard.
Prior to Jason Momoa stepping into his scale-covered orange and green supersuit, Aquaman was often considered to be the laughingstock of the DC catalogue, mocked that he could only really talk to fish and was pants in comparison to the likes of Superman and Wonder Woman. We got a brief glimpse of Aquaman during Batman v Superman and showcased far more prominently in 2017's Justice League, but with James Wan at the helm late in 2018, audiences were finally taken to the depths of the ocean in Aquaman's solo film. And boy was it a lot. One thing about James Wan's direction is that he goes for it. There is nothing held back, and for the most part it pays off. With the premise of Aquaman, you have to be a little silly, you can't take yourself too seriously, but I have to say that the film on occasion does tread a fine line before tipping over into cartoon territory. You've got octopuses drumming, Willem Dafoe riding a hammerhead shark, Julie Andrews voicing a kaiju monster, and Mira transforming wine into daggers. Yeah, Aquaman is utterly ridiculous at points. It's also a mess in terms of its narrative. The plot merges together so many different stories at once, travelling from A to B to C to D, then skipping to F and hurtling all the way through the alphabet that, astonishingly, the almost 2.5 hour runtime seems too short to cram all of this in. That being said, as a comic book fan who never thought we would ever see Atlantis on screen, James Wan truly achieved the impossible, and he crafts some amazing visuals. There is a lot of CGI, and at points it does feel like someone is waterboarding you with the effects, but at other points it forms one giant spectacle that makes it somewhat understandable that this is the only DCEU movie to gross over $1 billion. Yeah, an Aquaman movie made more money than both Batman and Superman going head to head. The action is epic and filmed with energy bursting through the frame. King Orm was a pretty so-so villain, but Black Manta was badass. And you know what? Call me a softie, but that ending, where Atlana finally returns to Temuera Morrison's lighthouse keeper, it gets me all nice and warm. Silly? Yes. Weird? Yeah. Way too much in places?
Oh, yes.
But ridiculously fun to watch? I'd say so. Now, after emerging from the ocean, our next stop sees us travelling back in time to the 80s. this was meant to be released in the summer of last year, then it got pushed and wound up partially being released in cinemas if they could open, but also streaming on services like HBO Max or available for purchase on demand. And I'll be honest, watching this on a TV didn't feel as cinematic as I had hoped, but hey, you gotta make the best out of the hand you dealt. Now, Wonder Woman 1984 was coming off of a very strong debut for her character in her feature film from 2017. Patty Jenkins was returning to direct, Gal Gadot was obviously reprising her role, Chris Pine was also somehow coming back, Kristen Wiig was cast as Cheetah, Pedro Pascal cast as Max Lord, Hans Zimmer scoring the movie, it's gonna be set in the 80s. And in all honesty, I feel like I enjoyed this sequel a lot more than most. There seemed to be a mixed reception with fans and critics noting flaws within the story, and look, there are absolutely some glaring issues. The screenplay itself is filled with numerous plot holes and conveniences, elements such as a simple wishing stone being made the MacGuffin of the film, yeah, it's a bit lazy. Steve controversially being brought back in the body of another man does raise some awkward questions, and the resolution indicating that some people who may have wished for world peace or all known illnesses to be cured having to retract that wish, well, that's a bit of a stretch. That being said, what I love most about Wonder Woman 1984 is how unabashedly hopeful it is. One of the opening scenes features Wonder Woman stopping robbers at a shopping mall, and it instantly took me back to watching Richard Donner's Superman and how buoyant that tone was. And that tone pretty much continues throughout. It doesn't have as much action as one would have liked in a 2.5-hour Wonder Woman film, but it all comes down to how I enjoyed spending time with these characters. The sheer optimism ingrained into every frame, and just the fun it's having in the moment. Sequences like Diana and Steve flying through the fireworks, the blistering opening set on Themyscira, and that beautiful moment where Diana finally takes flight, which is also bolstered by what I think is Gal Gadot's best performance to date, really helped make Wonder Woman 1984 just a lovely and heartfelt movie. Now, before rewatching all of these films, I'll admit this next film was lowered down on my list, but after seeing it for a second time, it has now jumped up to number 5 on this ranking.
So just say it? Like, Shazam?
Yes! Carry my name, and with it you carry all my powers. The wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the stamina of Atlas, the power of Zeus, the courage of Achilles, and the speed of Mercury.
When I first saw Shazam, I remember thinking, this was fun. Nothing really that special, but yeah, I had a good time. And then never really paid much attention to it after. But I was binging my way through this universe, got to Shazam, and boy, I completely overlooked this the first time round. It may not really fit in tonally to some of the other DC films, but on its own, this is unreservedly a total blast. Shazam is a lesser known property within the DC library, so Warner Brothers and director David F. Sandberg had a bit of an uphill climb to get audiences invested in the character and their history. Thus, they made the wise decision to primarily keep this as a comedy. You've got young Billy Batson, who keeps flitting from foster home to foster home before inadvertently being bestowed with ultimate power by a wizard. Just by saying Shazam, he transforms into Zachary Levi with godlike powers, but still retaining the mentality and personality of a teenager. Levi was perfectly cast, brilliantly embodying the man-child nature and sharing amazing chemistry with Jack Dylan Grazer as best friend Freddy. The whole dynamic of a kid gifted with superpowers makes for some really funny and creative hijinks to the point where you actually buy that Zachary Levi is meant to be a child. It certainly borrows elements from a film like Big with Tom Hanks, and there is a neat little homage during the fight between Billy and Mark Strong's Dr. Sivana. Speaking of Dr. Sivana, the villain is where the film does lose some brownie points. It's a really formulaic antagonist with a generic evil scheme, and also, I do think that scene in the boardroom goes way too hard considering the tone that had already been established. I mean, prior to that scene, it's light, easy breezy fun for the whole family. Then Sandberg leans into his horror roots and has these creatures biting the heads off people, chucking them out windows to their death, and slaughtering them. It's a pretty sudden switch. Regardless though, it does culminate in a very fulfilling climax. Thrilling action, good-natured humour, the sensational moment where the Shazam family finally make their debut, which for me is one of my favourite moments in the whole of the DCEU. This film may not reinvent the wheel of superhero movies, but it does set out to entertain, and I believe that it succeeds tremendously. In at number 4 really appeared to be the turning point of the DCEU. For some people it was for the better, and for some, the worse. I am telling you now, if you did not out and out hate BVS but found it kind of disappointing that it never really felt like it came together by the end, watch the Ultimate Edition. There is 30 minutes more material, and it is insane how much this extra material patches together some of the intrinsic story elements. Pretty much all of Lex's motivations and plans are coherently explained and outlined. The manipulation and puppeteering that he is able to orchestrate between Batman and Superman actually makes sense rather than what was illustrated in the choppy theatrical cut. It takes the movie, in my opinion, from good to fantastic. But, backtracking slightly, understandably, there was a lot of hype for BVS. Two titans of the comic book world finally sharing the big screen for the first time. Now, I remember when it was first announced in Hall H at Comic-Con. Snyder introduced Harry Lennox to read the passage from Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. They roll the footage of Superman's logo as the Batman insignia fades in behind. And the world went nuts. Then Ben Affleck was cast as Bruce Wayne / Batman. Now, even with it landing at number 4, Batman v Superman is far from perfect. The biggest issue it has is that it's trying to be way too many movies in one. A sequel to Man of Steel, as Superman and the world is wrestling with the consequences of his actions. A solo Batman detective story uncovering a conspiracy involving Lex but also harbouring resentment towards Superman. Snyder may not have a perfect hit rate, but Christ almighty, when he does hit, it connects. The results are thunderous. Ben Affleck is outstanding as Batman. I'm honestly not that fussed that he kills in this film because this isn't the Batman from a lot of the comics that we've read, and over the course of the film, and other films, he shows development as he learns to trust more. His fight scenes, especially the warehouse battle, are some of the best on-screen Batman action of all time. The build to the fight between Batman and Supes, it does take its time, but I thought the wait was worth it. The fight is pretty much everything I'd hoped for and expected in a fight between Batman and Superman. Batman fighting dirty, Superman going full beast mode. Sure, the resolution with Martha,
Why did you say that name?
is hokey and underwhelming, but I don't actually despise it like some do. But that entire sequence and what led to it with these clash of ideologies that the extended edition properly explores paid off spectacularly. And in contrary to many critics, I do think there is a nuance to the storytelling. The exploration of Superman struggling with support and treated like an outsider brilliantly relates to Jonathan Kent's fear explored in Man of Steel. Now, did we need Doomsday? Not necessarily, but it didn't bother me too much because the introduction to Wonder Woman is the most badass entrance to any movie ever. And seeing the Trinity form, it continues to give me chills. I'm not blind to the movie's flaws, but in my opinion, the positives far exceed the negatives, and I honestly cannot stress how much the Ultimate Edition adds to the film. And so we come to the final 3, and earning the bronze medal is a landmark in comic book movie history. For many people, Wonder Woman was a much needed palate cleanser within the DCEU. The general reception to the films beforehand had been mixed, to say the least, but Wonder Woman came storming into the picture, providing an immensely crowd-pleasing experience. One of the most refreshing aspects about Wonder Woman was that the film didn't bog itself down with setting other films up. It put its story at the centre, and telling it properly was always the main priority. Wonder Woman is also a huge turning point in superhero cinema. To give you an idea, every female-led superhero movie up until this point had been universally panned. Halle Berry's Catwoman, Jennifer Garner's Elektra, just to name a few. Wonder Woman became this beacon that female superheroes have the strength and ability to lead their own films and empower anyone who watches it. Gal Gadot really made the character her own, and does a fantastic job. I have to admit, I was a little sniffy when she was initially cast, but now she is synonymous with this role. I thought all the scenes on Themyscira were brilliant in introducing us to this world and the Amazons as a whole. Chris Pine as Steve Trevor was a great addition. I was worried he'd be a thinly written character with not much to do other than follow Diana on her journey, but the script really gives him a role to chew on, and the relationship that develops between Steve and Diana does wonders as the heart of the film. And they even have some really impressive and well-written conversations about humanity and the essence of being a hero. All of the action is electrifying, the entire No Man's Land sequence is the centerpiece of the film, and no matter how many times I've seen it, watching Wonder Woman stride across the battlefield blocking the flurry of bullets and mortars, it's easily up there as one of the greatest comic book movie moments of all time. The final act does settle for a perfunctory CGI smash and crash him against Ares, and the villains up until that point do come across as cardboard cutout antagonists, but it doesn't lose any of the emotion in the process, and I think that's the important thing. On the whole, Wonder Woman felt special when I watched it for the first time, and still feels special almost 4 years later. And then there were two. One that started it all, and the most recent release to date. But which will take the crown? Here is my second favourite entry into the DCEU.
They have failed 100,000 worlds. They always fail. I have come to enlighten you to the great darkness. I will bathe in your fear.
Daughters of Themyscira! Show him your fear! We have no fear!
I can't remember an event in movie history quite like this. A film that was basically resurrected through a constant stream of fan support to allow a director the chance for his vision to be completed. The story of how the Snyder Cut came about is fascinating, but the finished product itself, I mean, it's totally perplexing. How Warner Brothers looked at this and thought, nah, we'll just keep like a fraction of this and choose to play it safe. They saw the Flash entering the Speed Force and thought, you know what, that's cool, but instead we're just gonna have him fall on Wonder Woman's boobs. Why?
Funny.
Now, Snyder's Justice League definitely does feel like the first chapter of a larger trilogy, and as much as I'd love to see the Snyderverse be restored, I can still rest happy knowing that at least we got a Justice League movie worthy of calling itself a Justice League movie. The 4 hours, yeah, not every minute flies by, and certainly some trimming here or there wouldn't have gone amiss, but watching this in its entirety is epic. I remember after BVS thinking, okay, seeing where they've left things, we're gonna need at least a 4 or 5 hour movie to properly set the stage and deliver what Snyder is setting up, and I wasn't wrong. But the longer runtime isn't wasted. Snyder imbues his story with so much heart and passion, you can tell he has put every ounce of his being into this, especially given the circumstances revolving around the loss of his daughter, and also merges well into that predetermined tone that Snyder had established in Man of Steel and BVS, so if you are a fan of those films, odds are you're likely to get a real kick out of this. The central story is actually made coherent, and the relevance of Darkseid, Steppenwolf and the Mother Boxes are properly explored, rather than just dumped like it was in 2017. All of the characters get so much more screen time, and it's used effectively. Ray Fisher truly is the heart of the film as Cyborg, and his overall emotional arc really made for this source of vindication of how he was pretty much cast aside in the theatrical cut. Batman was shown to have grown and developed and really taken on that leadership role. Aquaman's story bleeds in nicely to his solo film. And the Flash, whilst still the comic relief, isn't treated like a moron, and gets probably one of my favourite scenes in the whole film. As for Superman, he doesn't get loads of screen time, but when he shows up, it's pitch perfect what Snyder and Henry Cavill do here. Even Steppenwolf gets an actual character here and looks menacing and intimidating. Tom Holkenborg's score is grand and bombastic, adding to the absolute spectacle. Yes, the difference between this and what was released in 2017 is light and day. But forget about that. Treat this as a Justice League movie, and I don't think that we could have asked for more. And so, it doesn't take a genius to work out what's left. My favourite movie in the DC Extended Universe is...
We wanted you to learn what it meant to be human first. So that one day, when the time was right, you could be the bridge between two peoples. Look. Pause. You can save her, Cal. You can save all of them.
Man of Steel is the greatest Superman film of all time. Okay, thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video. Going into Man of Steel, no one really had any idea what to expect. I mean, a year prior, everyone was still on the come down from the culmination of Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, and Snyder had definitely earned himself a dedicated fan base in adapting comic book stories with 300 and Watchmen. But what would he do with the Man of Steel? Answer? Knock it clean out of the park. And hey, I get that not everyone loves this, but I don't think anyone can deny that Snyder brought Superman into the modern era. And for me, it was sensational. If Richard Donner and Christopher Reeve were focused on depicting Superman the icon, Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill wanted to focus on Kal-El Clark Kent the individual. The first half of the movie is dedicated to the rise of Superman, but not before Snyder gives his vision of Krypton, and I really dug the level of world building and detail poured into this glimpse that only adds to Zod and his motivation. There are enlightening flashbacks to his bond formed with Jonathan Kent, played by Kevin Costner, who I don't think gets anywhere near enough credit for his performance in this film, and Pa Kent's love for his son wanting to keep his powers hidden until the human race was willing to accept him, I think is such powerful storytelling. After all, DC tells their best stories focusing on gods wanting to become human, and it's in that moment when Clark finally steps out of the ship in his suit, ready to embrace who he is, and Hans Zimmer's score fires up. That was the moment when I realized, wow, I am watching a Superman movie by someone who really gets this character. That entire flight sequence, I honestly don't think could be improved upon. It's quintessential Superman that is going to take a lot for any filmmaker to do something better with the character. And as the film ticks on nearing the final explosive act, you might as well have Snyder turn to the camera and go, okay, we've spent this time setting up the world, introducing you to my version of Superman, now we're going to have some fun. From the moment when Zod attacks Martha and Superman smacks into Zod, resulting in a blistering fight across Smallville, that's when Snyder begins to show us a side of Superman that we had yet to see on the big screen. The action in this film is big, it is loud, it is destructive. But newsflash, if two superpowered beings were gonna go hell for leather, it ain't gonna be pretty. Everything about this finale is endlessly thrilling. Superman destroying the world engine machine is a real defining moment for his character. His fight against Zod is brutal that you instantly connect to the stakes of which they're fighting for, and it ends with Superman being forced to kill Zod in order to save a group of humans. And for anyone who said,
oh well, Superman wouldn't kill,
it's called character. He literally let out a guttural roar because he knew that in doing so, he now is the last remaining Kryptonian. I just think that this film is terrific from start to finish. It's not universally beloved, I know that. That's cool. But without question, I could stick this on right now and be captivated for every single second. And that is why it's my favourite movie in the DCEU. Well, there we are, a tour of the DC Extended Universe, and Man of Steel stands atop them all. But of course, that's just my opinion. I want to know your order, so feel free to share your opinions in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please click that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Before I go though, I do hope that you enjoy this extra special fan edit I put together celebrating the DC Extended Universe. I'll see you later, guys.
You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards. They will race behind you. They will stumble. They will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun camp. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders.